Voiceoctover 2022. Your favorite actors being interviewed. Welcome to the surprise Halloween special of Voiceoctover 2022. My final guest is one that I was very much hoping to get. He's an extremely busy man and was kind enough to spare us perhaps a little over an hour of his time between doing a million things. He has been, everything from Leonardo on Ninja Turtles to the Dark Magician of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dean Venture from Venture Brothers, Horo from Shaman King, Mikey from Kappa Mikey, a whole bunch of characters on Bleach, Naruto, Gundam. He's starred in prestigious anime films such as Your Name, Patema Inverted, and Summer Wars. He's also the owner of MYAV Post and an accomplished voice director for the likes of Berserk, Samurai Deeper Kyo, Ninja Nonsense, Huntic, Peter Rabbit, Just Cause 3, Hanazuki, A Silent Voice, Mao Mao, Promare, Tokyo Godfathers, Star Wars Visions, Bell, and many, many, many more. Michael Sinterniklaas, everybody. Hi.
Hey, wow. That was, you really got me on that boogity opening there. It's Halloween. I should have expected, but
I left Mondays open because there were 5 Mondays within the month, and I'm like, well, if I can get that many guests, and I'm very happy that you did, because you are extremely one of the busiest people I've ever known in my life, so I really appreciate you being on here. And
sad but true, and my pleasure.
Well, no, the last time we did an interview on my channel was when Your Name, I think, was just about to come out or had just come out, and we tried to not talk about spoilers, which is honestly surprising that we managed to do that for like an hour about that movie. It was incredible, but that was a great film, and that's already like a few years ago now that we did that.
Yeah, talk about that movie without talking about that movie.
Yes, yeah, for an hour. Yeah, good luck with you and Steph. Stephanie, who's also been a guest for previous Voiceoctovers. She's great. Shout out to her.
That was a fun one. I remember that. That was cool.
Yes. Okay, so let's bust again. As I always say, I like to bust the generic crap out of the way. I know bits and pieces of your, as I have been making a joke out of your tragic backstory as to how you got into the acting business bit by the bug. I know that you are from Europe originally, I believe, right?
Yes, I am.
And you moved out here, I think, early on, maybe late teens, early 20s, can't remember. Give us the Reader's Digest of, getting interested in performance, starting in the acting world, perhaps out there, moving here, and then kind of broke into the voiceover world in the US, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Let's see. Child of an opera singer, and apparently was always very gregarious and would like make friends out of strangers at restaurants when I was an itty bitty baby. And so that was when my mom was like, this guy's something of a showman. And then got me into some classes in London. When I was growing up there, I went to Italia Conti Stage School, which has sort of a mixed reputation, but a lot of the Hogwarts kids went there, actually. Oh. Yeah. Like in the first movie, my mom was like, whoa, they discredited your old school. And I was like, what? And then I grew up watching the movie and TV series Fame, which was like my everything. That and the Dukes of Hazzard. My take on America was Hazzard County and New York City, and that's all I knew. And then we visited some family in Georgia, and it was Hazzard County. And I was like, oh, this is America. And then we went to New York, and I was like, this is also America. And that's the only America I knew. But when I was, then I moved to Texas, taking different classes there. We did a, this is going to be a Fame-themed autobiography. When we were in Austin, my mom found this like pretty Dolly Dinkle like kids performing group thing, and she was like, hey, at least it's some experience. And then she was like, way too Dolly Dinkle for my world-class son, so hey, let's turn this into like doing a real show. And from like a phone call to her buddy who's directing stuff on Broadway, who was friends with the guy who played Dr. Sharovsky in the original movie and series, and there was already a new series by then, but she turned our little Dolly Dinkle, like, maybe we'll, perform for an old folks home, into renting the biggest theater in Austin and getting the cast of Fame, including like Nia Peoples and I think Janet Jackson was there. And we did, because it was the new cast, and then we did a show with them. And I was like, that's cool. And while we were doing that, she ended up talking to people from the High School of Performing Arts in New York City, the actual school that Fame was based on, about doing a summer session in Austin. And boy, she was a powerhouse, and ended up getting an audition there, and I got picked. So I moved to New York and went to the school I grew up watching, and then went to a conservatory in North Carolina School of the Arts. Um, and then because I was there and my mom got sick and she had a stroke and that was a whole thing, I ended up staying there instead of going back to New York and getting to work at a recording studio because they were doing anime there. And I was a huge fan of it anyway in high school, back when like it was on VHS and there were no subs and you had to watch it what we called raw, and also like very degraded from many generations of tape,
Like from
what's the term?
Japan, I imagine.
Yeah, well, actually, there was a place called Tokyo Video just off Times Square, and my high school buddies and I would go in there. We got a lot of sideways looks because we were not Japanese, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" And we would watch shows like City Hunter and stuff that was literally taped off of Japanese TV. The cool part of that experience was we got Japanese commercials and promos, and we were like,
of course. Yeah.
that was fun. And we'd be, I'm sorry that I'm invading your store and we don't belong here, but we really want to watch this stuff.
I have to ask, what was your? Do you remember what was your very first anime ever, raw or otherwise?
I mean, my very, very, very first one was something with robots that I don't remember. It might have been Mazinger. Because I didn't know what the heck was going on. Then probably like G-Force, because I watched Battle of the Planets in England.
Of course, right.
And then Voltron and Robotech, but when I got to be like a hardcore, now I'm like the weird kid in school who's watching something no one else has ever heard of, and if they have, they call it Japanimation. Sorry, I had to say it, but it was another time. That would be like Bow, Bubblegum Crisis, City Hunter, Dominion Tank Police, Venus Wars. Riding Bean, which then that stuff started getting imported by Animego. So when I was in North Carolina, I heard about Riding Bean and no one knew what the heck a Riding Bean was. And I was like, wait a minute. They're like, is it a food? Is it a ride? I was like, no, it's like this kind of, I don't know, getaway driver guy. And he's not really a superpower, but he's got the thing. And then he hits the brakes and the grenades blow up on the hood of the car. And they're like, what? You're a nerd. I was like, yes. And then I got to audition for the second thing they did. Actually, the guy who played Bean in the very first Animego dub, which was Riding Bean, he played Bean, was the stand-in for Brendan Lee in The First Crow, which was like when I got to that city, was the first thing I ever did. Like 3 days after getting off a bus, basically, I was like,
wow.
They sent me to the Fincannon casting office, and I was on the set of The Crow. Next to Brandon Lee at some point.
So while you were you were doing theater, you did some on-camera stuff. I know. I remember at a convention we went to, you showed a clip of like you were like a pizza guy in an episode of something. I can't recall.
That was that weird panel. It was like, what's the embarrassing first thing? My first SAG job that got me my SAG eligibility was Matlock.
That's right. Oh my god. Yeah, and you were just like, I don't have any change.
Younger viewers, the line was, I don't have change for 100. Little acting note. When I read for it, all these really great actors in town were up for it, and they're like, oh, I got this great idea. I'm gonna make it really funny. And I was like, oh crud, I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's Pizza Guy. Is it supposed to be funny? And then so they literally like, oh, this is Michael Sinterniklaas. He's great. I was like, oh, thanks, Mark and Greg. And hey, what's going on? Hi. Oh, you're a casting person for Matlock. Great, nice to meet you. They're like, okay, let's go. And I was like, sorry, I don't have change for 100. Okay, thanks, guys. I'm going to leave now. And I was like, I didn't do anything. And I think that's maybe why I got cast, because it's a show called Matlock, not The Pizza Guy.
And also, I mean, it is that Zen thing of like, to act without actually acting, and somehow like this weird kind of in between state of you're brilliant, and but I didn't do anything. Exactly.
That was said about Stella Adler when she did a play where she played the maid, and you wouldn't have even known it was Stella Adler. And they're like, yeah, because she's acting, as opposed to like being a star. That's not what inhabiting a person is. Yeah. So
I want to get into that too. There's a lot of things that you've teased that I want to get into a little bit later. On the note of North Carolina, so anime dubbing in North Carolina in the mid to late 90s, I'm assuming.
Maybe
perhaps earlier than that. Perhaps. Okay,
yeah, maybe a little earlier. But like, you're close. You're very close.
But that was that was a strange thing when like, a random dub or two would pop up in like, not one of the expected major centers that was doing stuff at that time. So you had established yourself, you'd been doing performance at that point. So who were these guys? They gave you their start in acting and also in directing. This is pre MYAV Post and founding that and everything. So, you mentioned Bubblegum Crisis. That was a show that you worked on, I think. Yeah.
That was the first thing I ever worked on, and I just thought I had made it. I loved Bubblegum Crisis before, and then when I was literally, okay, so I got to give a huge shout out to Southwind. My agent who had, God rest her soul, she was a lovely woman, had kind of blown an opportunity for me to star in a Lucasfilm. Long story short, that's all
Oh.
I'll get into for now. But she basically harangued Southwind Studios, spelled sort of Southwind with like a Y in it.
Uh-huh.
Um, I went in to read for this thing and I was like, oh my God, this is where I want my life to live. This is incredible. And I talked to Chuck Agresta, who was doing all the sound design for it. Now we get what are called M&Es, music and effects tracks, to dub
Hmm.
against so it can be consistent. They had to regenerate all the music and all the effects from scratch,
Wow.
painstakingly, before the technology was there. And I just like poked my head in a room I shouldn't have, saw some muscle bound guy playing with a Korg Poly 800 and a Kai S1000. And I was like, oh, and he goes, what are you doing in here, actor? And I was like, oh, sorry. Hey, is that a Korg Poly 800 you're using as a controller for the S1000? And he was like, yeah, why? And I was like, well, Poly 800's not velocity sensitive, right? Meaning when you hit the key at different, like, if you hammer the key at different velocities, it won't change the volume or the sound. Like modern keyboards, we're used to getting louder or quieter, like a real piano or like a real instrument. But that one only has one volume value per key. And so I was like, why are you using that as a controller? And he goes, because I want to enter everything at one level into the sequencer and then change the volume later for the mix. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, wait, do you know about MIDI? And I was like, some. And then he was like, Randy, the boss, Randy Drew, gave me my shot. Big shout out to Randy Drew. He's a lovely, sweet wizard of a man. And, basically then when that door opened, my agent, who was supposed to get me acting work, was like, let the kid work there. He just wants to work there. Let the kid work there. He's a sweet kid. Let him work there. And Randy was like, we're not hiring. We don't need anyone. She's like, yeah, but just let him work there. He's like, we're all staffed up. She's like, sure, I know that, but he's a good kid. Don't pay him. He's like, fine. So I interned at first, and I was literally making duplicates of the show so that we could give it to the cast so they could rehearse, which is not something that even happens today, right?
Uh-huh. Oh no.
And I'm literally running to the office next door. They had a separate space because they were expanding. And I was loading up VCRs with tapes and like hitting record, play. And then I was like, I'm contributing to the industry. That and making coffee. But as you know, since I grew up in Europe and I was more of a tea drinker, I didn't know how to make coffee. So I made such terrible coffee that I got promoted pretty soon to being a recording engineer, which they wanted me in that seat because I spoke actor. I knew all the guys in town and they were all musicians. So they were like, hey, if this guy's here, he can sort of help us talk to the actors. And Randy, who was directing stuff, would sometimes like sort of hit a roadblock and go, Michael, you know what I'm saying? Why isn't he doing the thing I want? And I was like, try using this language. And then he would get what he wanted. And that led to him letting me take over directing some incidentals and then taking over directing entirely for 80 Police Files, in which I cast that like the head of Fincannon casting there too, like Mark and Greg Fincannon and Lisa May. But Mark Fincannon ended up being one of the leads there. And he's
Wow.
a huge casting guy who now like rules like Atlanta, North Carolina. I think they're all the way through Louisiana, so not even just the East Coast. But
Good
yeah,
Lord.
and
So
he's a
what
sweet dear man. Yep.
what a bizarre, because I mean that's such a it's a little bit different now because like there's places kind of set up everywhere with remote recording and everything, but for a small market like that, for you to kind of make your mark and get like on the job training like practically at the gate, like that is not a common circumstance to have. So it's I don't know how long that period of time was, but then what led to then you found your own company. I'm assuming you go to New York after. I don't know if there was anything in between that, but then what led to the creation of MYV?
Little bit. So working there and then actually learning how to run a studio with a hand-wired DNR Dutch console and like tape. At that point, by the way, where everyone's used to now digital video, but we actually had to chase a tape deck for the video, which had audio on one side and a SMPTE track on the other. A SMPTE is the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. Gosh, I haven't said that in a decade. And they came up with a standard for how to mark where on a tape you are. So if you listen to it, it's a square wave. So it's just sound on, sound off, sound on, sound off, and it sounds like really hard and fast. And that would tell our pre-Pro Tools rig that it was the first PC-based DigiDesign Audio DAW, digital audio workstation, called Session 8. 8 tracks, very weird workflow. If you wanted to silence something, you wouldn't cut it out. You would cover it with a silence file. You would make a selection and render silence on top of the audio. Very weird. And it crashed a lot, and I got really used to working with that thing. But once I knew how to run a studio, my good buddy Jared Faber, who was now a television composer, and he does like lots of primetime shows, movies, Teen Titans Go and Teen
Oh
Titans Go to
yeah,
the movie. Yeah. All that like funny, funky stuff you hear, that's him. Sometimes he's singing
nice.
on it too. But he's an old mate, and he was starting to work at a game developer in New York, and was like just driving up, getting like retrieving a car from his like grandmother who was giving it to his father, and basically driving up the coast. And so on his way, he stopped into Wilmington, North Carolina, and I showed him the studio, and he was like, "Man, I need someone who can do this, and it would be really cool if you want to come back to New York." And then I was faced with the question, do I want to? Because I was starting to do really well there, and I was like, I could be a big fish in a small pond, or and then wonder what if, or go back to New York and roll the dice. And I was certainly young enough at that point that I was more afraid of not knowing what could have been. And I talked to Randy, and he was like, "Man, I love and support you, and it'll be a hit to the studio, but we'll make do, and I wouldn't want to hold you back." And he's such a sweet man. And I went to New York, and then worked at a game developer, and then was the audio lead there. And I wasn't even saying I was an actor. Then other engineers who knew I spoke actor, and they didn't know any actors, but they also didn't know how to talk to actors, would hire me for voiceover stuff. And then that led to eventually, I had talked to John Sarabella, the head of Media Blasters, about
Hmm.
maybe doing some stuff. I found him at a convention and was like, "Hey, I used to dub anime, and I'd like to do that again." And he was like, "Okay, we were looking for stuff." That's a pretty accurate impression. He'd say, he'll like lead his sentences with that, and then,
Uh-huh.
"Yeah, yeah, sure." And then so that impression's going to come back. So at the time, my friend Scott Hula, North Carolina, was looking for work, and he was doing amazing work down there. And he and Randy were old friends. And so I actually recommended him, and then kind of went my own way and just started doing, after the video game company went out of business. My artist friends told me to freelance, and I didn't know what that meant, but they were like, "Well, at least you go out there and you kill what you eat, and you put your name out there. Take about a year or two, and then you'll see, you'll get work." And I just worked at different post houses and picked up stuff and worked on a couple films, and I was doing like legit like film stuff. And then, but I always had this tug to come back to doing anime. I felt like dubs weren't great, and they needed to be better, and I didn't know why they weren't better, but I thought I could solve for it. And then a little while later, after a couple of years of kind of forgetting that I even introduced Scott to Media Blasters, he calls me up and says, "There's too much work. Would you like to take one of these things?" And I was like, "Would I? That'd be awesome." So now I have a meeting, because and that, they both forgot that I had introduced them. But then Scott introduces me to John, and I was like, "Great! I'm just gonna run with that." There's no reason to be like, "Well, I did it for," like, that's pointless and petty. I was just like, "This is great. Thanks for remembering me and thinking of me." And Scott's always been a wonderful man. So I go meet John, and he was like, "Okay, so we've got this thing called a Demon Fighter Code Show, and it basically came for free with an order of some other stuff. So we don't really care what happens with it. We use it as a test. If you do a good job, we'll give you more. If you do a bad job, we'll give you porn." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" So
Oh wow.
then
And that hasn't changed much, has it? Even
I mean,
today.
so I guess I did a good enough job that I didn't end up going down the porn track.
Yeah,
Great. And
which, of course, at the time, and we'll not, go too deep into this, but the New York dubbing scene was the place for that for a while. There was a little bit of crossover of some people in some of that stuff back in the day.
As
But,
far as I know,
you know.
there were a couple guys who loved it and were kind of good at it, because they would like put their own sort of spin on it, and no one was watching over their shoulders, so they could make them funnier, I guess. And then there was one guy in North Carolina who ended up doing some of it also for Media Blasters, but I don't know if there's like no money in it anymore. I haven't heard of a dub of hentai
I mean,
happening in
it still
ages.
happens once in a while,
Does it?
and usually through Media
so
Blasters.
naive.
But let's not go too deep into that. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so here's something. So I mean, you are one of the most like interconnected people I've also ever met. Like, I feel like somehow I mean, just before we started recording, you were telling me a story about something. It's like, how do you? Wow, you just know all these people somehow. When you got to New York, obviously you bounced around a lot. How did you get to know the voiceover scene? Because by the time that you would have been there, I think that by that time, at least Pokemon, I think, would have been underway, and Slayers and some other stuff. Taj was doing things. 4Kids was around. And there were certainly like people that had been, guys like Dan Green and otherwise that, were kind of all around doing stuff in different places. How did you get to kind of wedge yourself into that scene and meet a lot of these guys? Because you've worked with all these dudes for so long.
That's a interesting question. It's a good one for me. I have to kind of reverse engineer my life and figure out how that happened. So when I was at the game company, we did a Pink Panther game.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and it was written by Emily Kapnick, who then created after that, As Told by Ginger, and then a bunch of primetime shows. Emily's Reasons Why Not, Selfie, Suburgatory, other stuff
She's a
too.
brilliant writer, brilliant
She's a
creator.
genius
Absolutely.
writer
Yeah,
and show creator
absolutely.
and high school buddy. And we all
Oh.
worked at the game company together. Jared got us both our jobs there. Jared's a little star maker. And we while we were doing that, we ended up looking for actors and finding some people here and there, including the voice of Zod in Berserk, who no one knows who this guy is or where he came from. And we found him through some friends like who were actors in high school and stuff. That I think that's the beginning of working with voiceover people in New York. And then when the company went away and I was freelancing, I eventually got to the point where I had to get into a space, well, largely because of actually for Demon Fighter Kocho,
Hmm.
which is a cheeky one. So it's not porn, but it's definitely not for kiddos.
Yeah, it's
Um,
up there for sure.
it's very silly humor. I don't think it would hold up well today.
Hmm.
But it got reviewed as getting a dub it didn't deserve, which was a compliment.
Wow.
But while I was doing that, I ended up meeting some other voiceover people, and then I think Lisa Ortiz is probably the first connection that like introduced me to people like Jamie McGonigal and a bunch of other people. So
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
to Lisa, like I met a lot of the people for the first thing I ever did. Some people, were my theater connections, and I met people through theater, and I love bringing
Hmm.
theater actors in to do dubbing and voiceover in general. Um, and we had a lot of people who you never would have heard of or haven't worked since in that. But that's where it started. And then Lisa. And then when I got okay, so the studio that I sublet half of, it was my studio in downtown New York,
Hmm.
was the place my buddy Chris Berlotti, who's now at HBO, had built, and his partner left. So I took his partner's room and we split this place up. I had a huge booth built like a tank. You could literally set a bomb off in there and not hear it outside. But one night before I was supposed to record Lisa, it was my mom's birthday on September 10th, 2001. I was like, okay, I got to go take my mom out. And then after I did, I was like, should I come in early or come back late and finish and then come in later to record Lisa? And I was like, you know what? I'm a night owl. So I went back in after my mom's birthday and put the finishing touches on something and left the building at like, I don't know, wee hours, like just a few hours before some planes hit the neighbors.
Yeah,
And
ass,
then
ass o'clock in the morning, of
yeah.
course. As is
So then,
usual.
like, literally, like 2 or 3 hours later, 9/11 happens, and I can't get back into
Ooh,
work.
oof.
And from that point, I have to find something else. So then, um, long story short, we did Night Hunters. The first 5 episodes, no, the first 6 episodes, whatever the first volume was done in 5 days.
Hmm.
Literally from casting to
Wow.
mix, 5 days.
Wow.
No one's ever done anything like that before or since. And that was after 9/11 and all kinds of other personal stuff. So real hard.
Jesus.
And you were there. You remember what it was like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
I was in middle school at the time, but
yeah, sure,
we
sure.
won't talk
Yeah,
about that.
that's fine. That's fine. But
Lord.
you were in the area.
Yes, of course, of course.
Um, so after that, I found the space that is currently where NYAV is. This
Hmm.
wonderful Greek man let me sublet a room, and I auditioned. If you ask the original Berserk cast, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we like auditioned under like a pop tent of blankets." And then by the first episode, I had makeshifted my first booth. And then how I became more of an actor, because at that point I was like producing and starting my little business and directing. And one of the cast, who asked me not to name her, now she's okay with it, but I'll still not say it. I'm giving too many hints as it is. Basically was like, I love this. This is my first voiceover job. I found her and the guy that plays Guts in the same Moliere play. And they were great. And I was really looking for new people to play all these voices because I just didn't know anyone that I thought was perfect for these roles. And these guys were perfect. I
Hmm.
love them so much in this roles. But when she fell in love with doing voiceover and animation, she started taking a workshop because she's very industrious and professional.
Hmm.
And then her coach was friends with a producer who used to work at Deke, and they were casting for this new Ninja Turtles. And she was like, "Oh my God, I just met this producer. They're doing Ninja Turtles. You should go. You should go read for them. You'd be a great Ninja Turtle." And I was like, "Okay, well, if they ask me to read, that'll be great." She's like, "Well, they don't know you. You just got to go." I was like, "Okay, guy, like I'm not gonna crash an audition. I run auditions." And she was like, "Dude, if you don't go, like," she's like, "You have to go. You just have to go. They need you." And I was like, "There's plenty of actors. Plus, I'm kind of feeling under the weather. My throat's a little." And she says, "If you don't go, I'll kick your ass." And
that
I was
sounds
like,
that sounds like Barry Barrelin. Absolutely, yeah.
yeah. And I was like, I think you could probably take me. So at that point, Mike Pollock, who I had discovered in a backstage ad,
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I got two good people out of 600 tapes, and Mike was one of them, and he's still working today. And
Yeah.
and so I was like, hey, do you ever go to that place, the Four Kids? And he's like, yeah, I'm going for Pokemon. So he's like, I'll bring you. And I was like, great. So I go there and I meet Rita at the desk, who terrified me when I met her, but became a friend. And she was like, who are you? And I was like, I'm Michael. And she's like, Michael who? And Pollock goes, he's not expected. And she's like, you wait a minute. And then she goes and gets the talent coordinator. And I'm like, they're going to arrest me. Why am I here? Why did I listen to that? This is better than getting my ass kicked, I guess. And then he's like, oh, we don't have you on the books and we're all full today. And I go, okay, bye. And then as I'm leaving, he goes, but we could see you after 6 if you want to come back. And I go, oh, okay. And then I said, should I bring like a tape or anything, like, picture? Neither of which I had, by the way.
Oh boy. Oh,
and then,
my this story sounds very personally familiar to me, Michael. Anyway,
really?
Continue. Oh yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm a fool for offering something I don't have. And he goes, no, that's okay. But let me give you some copies. So at least he gave me the sides for Raph was cast, Mikey, Donnie, and Leo. And then I took him back to my studio, which was literally 2 blocks away from their studio. And then I look at it for the next, like 30 minutes, and then I get back to work and I look at it again, and then I run back in. And I think the Leonardo ones, that's definitely going to be my worst one, because I don't know, I don't think I sound heroic. I play like nerds and goofs, and sometimes like
because you were gunning for. I think you said you were gunning for Donnie at one point.
I was like, first of all, like I remember the old Turtles, and like the techno babble was wrong, so I could correct it and do it with aplomb. I build computers. I overclock them. I was a champion Quake player internationally in the top 20. It was another time. But I go in there and they're like, okay, it's the end of the day. What are we doing? And then I read for the producers, and they're like, okay, what do you want to start with? And I go, let me see. Hey, let me do Leo. I'm gonna do that first. I think it's gonna be the worst one. And then I hear, I'm sorry, what did you say? So I think, oh, nuts. I've made them like extend their day. They all have families, and what am I doing here? I'm wasting their time. So I was like, all right, I put my foot in it. Let's double down. So I go, yeah, I'm not really that talented. I'd like to get this over with as quickly and painlessly as possible, please. And he goes, okay, just do whatever you want. And then so I read Leonardo and immediately apologized for my audition, which I don't recommend. And I was like, see, I don't sound like I'm a hero. And he goes, yeah, they're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Just use your natural voice. So I just read it again as me, and then I move on to Donnie, which I slaughter, and then I move on to, in a good way, move on to Mikey, which I thought it was fine and funny, but Donnie's the one. And then as I'm leaving, Carol Weissman goes, hey, let me just make sure I have your number, and literally scrawls it on like a scrap of paper, like that you would lose in the laundry. And then I forget about it, go on with my life, which everyone should do. If you audition for something, forget about it afterwards. You've done your job. Your job is to audition, move on. And then I go to AX for the first time, where I meet Stephanie Shea, and then I come back and my voicemail's full, and then I go through it and cleaning it out, and I hear, hi, this is Carol. Call me back at 4 Kids. So I call her back, and she goes, oh, I'm glad you called. I thought we were going to have to recast Leo. By the way, no one knows who the hell you are. How did you end up on my audition? I was like, I'm sorry.
You were not one of the 20 guys that they recycled in every episode of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh at that point.
I've never done anything at Taj.
Their pool was
kids,
so
nothing.
small. Yeah. Because I remember Turtles was one of the shows where they were beginning to open up the pool a little bit more to like not those same 15 to 20 guys they used in everything. But so from there, because I know also Tony Salerno, who I've met briefly. I would love to have him on this at some point too. Cause I know he was kind of a nexus for a lot of people. Like I feel like he got like half of the usual Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh guys like kind of into the scene way back. But I'm assuming after from there and then kind of getting with the 4 Kids, it's like, oh, now I know all of these guys and now they will be in everything I ever do at some point.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because his history was he was a producer at CPM, Central Park Media, and then he moved on to being an independent producer director and got work from CPM. And then so he knew all these actors and studios, and it made sense. And then he ended up directing there a little bit. Yeah, he was. And
he got interconnected all over the place. Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Going back a little bit, I do want to talk about Berserk for a moment because I know that's a show that's very special to you. It's very, very, very beloved series by a lot of the fans, and I know there was Media Blasters back in the day. So you discovered Mark Drazen, and I'm assuming Kevin Collins and Barry Baranen and many others through the casting.
And Michelle Newman and and Christopher Cromer and like all these people who are in this thing that were like had never done anything.
That defined these characters, and it's so funny because I look back and I think like, oh, these guys must be like, you know, old school. They've been doing this for so long, but I'm like, no, that was the beginning for some of these. Some of these shows are like the beginning for some of these people. And we were reminiscing a while because one of my I won't go into too much into this, but one of my very first jobs with you ever and for my whole career was when we did the movies. Back when I was still in New York. And, you know, and I hadn't seen the show in full yet, but I know, thanks. See, I scream my lungs out a lot.
Watch them on Netflix.
But we did, you know, we got everybody back generally. And I remember I knew all these characters. I hadn't seen the show in full at that time. But I knew all these characters. I had friends that were huge fans of it. I'd seen the bloopers, which were legendary for people back then. And I realized, oh my God, you guys all must have been, you know, my age or younger back then doing this show in 2001 and just like goofing around, having a good time and just making fun. Like, just, I'm sure you could go on and on. We could do a whole separate thing about just that show in itself, but any fond, cute memories of doing that show, just to kind of looking back at the 2001 series.
Gosh, I mean, countless. I mean, I'm still friends with all those people. You know, like I still talk to, well, all of them. And it really was a family. Takanodan, Band of the Hawk, really was an extended family. I mean, there's way too much personal stuff to get into. At one point, we all had.
I would hope that Kevin didn't sacrifice you all to the demon lords and stuff. But I mean, you know,
yet TBD on that.
Oh no,
no, I don't know. Kevin, by the way, I just want to say I found him at an NYU musical theater showcase, where they invite casting directors.
Kevin does musical theater, really? I hadn't noticed.
And that is exactly why.
Takes all.
That's why we had to do our rule for every volume of that original series. And then, you know, we did it for the films later, but he had to do a musical outtake. Had to. But the thing that I saw him do, and where I fell in love with Kevin, was he basically in this, you know, like rehearsal theater, and there's a bunch of, you know, like board casting agents and stuff, like, what's the selection? Any good free wine here? I got to get to something. And then he stands on a chair and sings a love song to himself.
Oh,
it was incredible. I was like, the confidence, the stones, and the voice on that guy. I love him. And for that kind of like be shown in like lithe, supple, powerful, like hero, like that kind of tough guy, which is a very Japanese archetype.
Of course.
I think he's for pound for pound, I think he's the greatest ever. So good.
He's pretty good. I do love him. I love it. Yeah, no, I love all that. I've got actually, Kevin's actually one of the few of that gang I've not gotten to meet before. I know he's New York based still.
I should introduce you.
Yeah.
He's still there. And I remember like recording, oh gosh, all these guys. There was one point he brought a sword that we still have at the studio. And it is a wooden sword. He just wanted to bring it to wield while he commanded the Band of the Hawk. And there was one night we were doing a later episode. I remember lots of rewrites in the booth just to try to really do our best. And, you know, I look back and there's stuff I wish I could have done better. But, you know, I think for its time, we really did the best we could, and we really tried hard. And I think it a lot of people have told me they think it kind of holds up. There's parts where I'm like, you know, this thing could be better, whatever. But
for sure, but you know what? I here's the funny thing. I've had that conversation, like Yu Yu Hakusho, which Justin Cook, that was his love child. That show, 100 something episodes. That was the one that really got me into wanting to do this, like, you know, years ago. And to look back, yeah, there's stuff that, like, you know, could be improved on or that doesn't hold up or whatever. But like, it was very clearly made with love, like very, very much so. And I think there were pioneers like yourself and like Justin, like Mary Elizabeth, and people all over, and like in Canada as well, that like really cared about this stuff. And the fact that you were already an anime appreciator, you know, even more so than just a fan, like you gave a shit about this as an art form. I always could tell that. I think that shows. I think that in some of those series that were done all the way back then, when it wasn't just like, all right, whatever, we got to just get this alternate language track on the DVD or the VHS tape or whatever. Like it was made with a level of passion. I think that people kind of feel that from the 2001 series, like at least from what I look at and from the people that I've talked to, just that are just viewers, like just the average viewers. They love it.
Thanks for saying that. I think that's actually a very keen observation, because I think, like, I've been asked things like, oh, why do your dubs sound the way they do, like in the positive way? Like, oh, it sounds like they're having an actual conversation. And that was something that like a lot of people and producers and, you know, aficionados of the genre were like, it occurs to me now that it doesn't sound like they're talking to each other. I'm saying a line and it sounds good. Now I'm saying a line and it too sounds good, but they're not conversing. And things like that were like always like really important to me. And I do think caring, the two things that you said that I really want to touch on are, I've typically said, not to sound trite or redundant, but I typically say the first thing you have to do is like the most important thing is caring. And you can't guarantee that. You would think anyone doing this would care about doing a good job. Everyone wants to look good or do well, but there is a difference between caring for the piece. And when I even got Demon Fighter Kocho and I watched it, I was like, oh, my initial reaction to it was, this is a sweet, poor, sick puppy that I want to nurse to health. And like, I want to give it the love and care that it needs to be a healthy young doggo. And I was like, that was my attitude. Not like, oh, this is a quick junky thing, we'll knock it out. And I definitely hear people, produce things and they're like, the money's only blah, blah, we got to knock it out. I've never looked at the budget side of things like I should. And that's one reason I don't think I am more successful than I am now. I mean, I work on really great things because I think people who get the difference come to me, and people who are just looking for volume, we don't speak the same language. And the second thing is making things with love. And there's so much love between the cast and for the show, which is easy. The show has some of the most incredible character development in anything. And some of the best panels I've ever done have been, people sort of focusing and asking questions on Berserk.
Yeah.
Those relationships are extraordinary. And I don't know a lot of other stories that are told that match it in terms of that.
Well, and the people that have been hired under you or alongside you, rather, that, I mean, Stephanie has taken such amazing care of Gundam, all the new Gundam stuff we've done the last like 10 years. Unicorn was 2010, I think. A long time. And all the, Griffin, who I worked with on Amaim, which was more of like a sub Gundam. Like, even he was like, no, I want to take good care. I think that there is definitely a through line to that. Something to end the note on Berserk real quick. Let's talk about the movies again. Something I'll never forget, and this is related to some of the advice stuff as well I want to get into. One of early formative things, because I had done 4 jobs at that point professionally, but I will never forget, we were doing, I think it was the second movie. It was when Casca and the gang were invading one of the Tudor castles. She was about to fight a Don.
Yeah.
And I was like an unseen soldier in the background just shouting, "Commander Casca!" Like that was the line, right? And I did it. And you were like, okay, less like you're concerned for your girlfriend and more like you're concerned for your mom. And I was like, how did you know that that's exactly what I was thinking? Like, as if I was like, oh no, my girlfriend is in danger. And then you told me that no, and I knew exactly how to change it. And I'm just like, wow. Like, okay, now I really, because, again, I had been enough of a fan of the stuff you guys have worked on just as a viewer before that to understand, yeah, no, these guys do a good job. Then I'm like, oh, now I really get it. Like, from that specific moment, as a little bit guy with one line in that movie, I was like, wow, okay. And then I remember, I think I also said, like, Michael, I want to be you when I grow up. And he's like, well, then don't grow up.
Yeah. Facts. I would say, 2 things about that. One, I think that story just displays what a communicative actor you are. And 2,
wow.
I don't think like the adage of no small parts. I think that a dub, what we're doing, especially in a dub, with anything that we create as an art, which is by definition a synthesis of all the mediums that we have to convey something personal and perhaps harder to convey in just one medium. Like, I can't tell you I love you, Juliet, as much as that play sort of demonstrates a different level of intensity, of devotion or obsession, or call it what you will. Is that a healthy love? I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but they all die. Anyway, but was it worth it? Was it better to love and lose than to never, and die and commit suicide than to never?
I don't know. I like living.
Yeah, I think life is a pretty good choice. But the. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot what I was saying. But I think in the artifice of what we're creating, it is only as strong as its weakest link. So every individual, and this always caught me as a fan watching stuff. If the leads are great, then some guy goes, "I'm here to lead the troops," and you're like, "What the heck just happened?" Then it snaps you out of it. So I think sometimes the bit parts are harder. They don't have the runway, the ramp up to like knowing who the hell they are. You got to make a knee-jerk decision, and they don't get to establish who they are. And if you don't nail it, then it's going to take you out. And there's so much to consider: physicality, proximity, relationship, history. Where are you coming from? Like, And I try to efficiently, but sometimes I take too long, give those people a thought so that they come from somewhere and they're going somewhere, as opposed to just I showed up to say my line. I think it really matters. It really matters.
Absolutely. God, as much as I want to talk about also funny stories about Turtles and Venture Brothers and stuff. Maybe at the end if we have time, because there's so many. We could go on for like 3 hours, but we don't have that, sadly. In what I mentioned, tying this in with about like the different kind of pioneers around the different parts of North America that were doing this, like that were very like-minded to you in certain regards and stuff. A rare thing about yourself, also, I only remembered this today. You have worked very extensively at least in the US specifically. I don't know, maybe you looked into doing stuff in Canada at some point, but you've worked very extensively in the 3 major dubbing markets of New York, Texas, and LA.
And North Carolina. Call it for it. That used to be a hub.
Sure enough. Yeah.
All the major markets, yeah.
What are, and from getting to know some of those folks around, like, from all these different people like Mary Elizabeth and Mike McFarlane and guys like that, and even in New York, guys like Dan Green and otherwise.
Yeah.
What are some things that like you were observing? And I don't know if they're the same or they've changed or otherwise. The differences and or maybe even some of the similarities between the 3 kind of major coasts, quote unquote, of the anime world.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. Well, oh gosh, my opinion of that has changed a lot, and it's all changed over time. Mm-hmm. I remember having a different sort of opinion of, starting in New York and then going to LA. The first thing that struck me was, there was something really familial and a little casual about the scene in New York, and that was very comfortable for me. And then when I went to LA, I was like, oh, everything's a little more buttoned up and professional. It kind of makes sense. There was less of it in New York and more of it in LA, so there was more kind of established Hollywood production sort of ideals, like starting on time. There was a little more like chatting and goofing in the New York side. But that's not about the work. That's just sort of the kind of the social impact of it.
Sure. It was also a lot more privatized. I felt like it wasn't until the last like decade that like a lot of the guys from the New York world became a little bit more open in like the in like the fandom kind of world, because there weren't a whole lot of them. That you were one of the few that were doing cons and doing social media stuff and putting yourself out there. There were a lot of them that like they just didn't do that stuff. They just go into work, they do the thing. I'm sure they had fun with it, but like it was very just kind of privatized. Whereas I feel like with Texas and LA and even Vancouver and maybe Toronto to a certain extent, like they were all about like getting themselves out there and hustling and doing all these different things all over the place. It was a little bit of a different vibe.
I feel like that's the main thing about Texas, Texas also felt, Texas was an interesting hybrid because like everyone knew everyone hung out. So it felt a little like familial New Yorkie in that way. I mean, look, there was definitely a family in LA and, I only later became a part of it. But so maybe that's why that I had that opinion. But definitely like all the studio stuff, they had more studios, bigger studios, more like, impressive facilities working on all this stuff. But because this is Hollywood. This is where everything gets made anyway. But in Texas, it was kind of a combination. And the first like iteration of Funimation was in a bank building owned by the
conglomerates above that.
Yeah. Like Gen's family had all these properties. Like, oh, we'll use the second floor of this building. Yeah. And but they were like, figuring it out as they go along. And actually, I hipped them to a couple things. One, using digital video, not chasing tape, but also they were using this software package that automates some of the ADR process that like gives you the beeps and stuff. And I was in there recording, and they were like, hey, you keep clipping the audio. And to me, that meant I was too loud. And I was like, what do you mean? Do you want me to be loud, like quieter, or pull back, or do you want to turn me down? They're like, no, you're clipping. I was like, so that's a volume thing, right? They're like, no, you're coming in a little too early, and it's clipping the head of the file. And I was like, oh, well then, so wait, your recording point is after the last beep, like as the fourth beep? They're like, yeah, you got to come just a little bit like after that so you don't get clipped. And I was like, why don't you use handles? They're like, what's a handle? And then I told them what handles were, and then that got proliferated. That just meant they could record, they would still have the beeps at the same point, but it would record a little bit ahead of that so you wouldn't lose takes. And I was like, yay, I helped the day. Oh yes, I'm so influential. And there's a bunch of New York engineers who were like, oh, Sinterniklaas taught me all my shortcuts.
What was the actually? I don't even remember. I feel like I should know. What was the first thing you did at Funimation at the time? Obviously pre Crunchyroll,
Oh
like
gosh.
way back.
Oh gosh. Oh, I don't even remember. Oh gosh.
Because you were sprinkled around different things, like little guest characters in
Yeah.
like Shin Chan and Burst Angel stuff like that.
Yeah, that
I think
was
you
later
were in
even.
DBZ. I
did
remember
some
you were
DBZ.
somebody in DBZ.
Yeah, DBZ and DeGrayman and
That's
maybe
right.
oh gosh, there was someone like something blue, something not sub. Gosh, what was it? I don't remember. But
Oh,
Schemmel,
Blue Gender
maybe Blue is that a thing?
might have been.
I
That was like
I
one of
don't
the
know.
first things they did. Yeah, and Lisa was in that because she was visiting there at the time.
Oh yeah, it might.
That was early
She
on.
definitely
Yeah,
did it
yeah.
before I did. Again, Lisa,
Yeah.
she's the OG and
Yeah,
the
of course,
trailblazer. But yeah, Schemmel got me. Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku, got me introduced to those guys. And he ended up, we met at a convention, and he told me he wanted to move to New York and work on this stuff and learn how to direct and stuff. And he came and was kind of the first employee at NYV Post. Oh, and also then the next few were Mark DeRazon ended up being a director with us. Dan Green, Alexa Zimmerman, Carrie Kiernan ended up inventing the position of office manager for my studio. She's like, you're great.
Right.
You need help. I don't want to be a waitress anymore. Let's help each other out. And I was like, oh, brilliant. And if it weren't for her, I wouldn't, I'd still be like running around trying to like cut checks for everyone and like schedule, and it'd be a nightmare.
Here's something to, because I know we're kind of getting close to end of time here, but one of the big reasons that I wanted to do this series and get the certain people that I got, a lot of veterans and folks that have been doing this and been all over the place, is a lot of myself and my contemporaries, we do this for a living. We do a lot of dubbing and a lot of video games and things like that. Some of us have dipped, like I've done a small handful of pre-live things. I did my Cartoon Network show and whatever else. And a lot of folks actually attend the night that we're recording this. We're time traveling here. I'm taking a class with Mick Wingert, who was one of my guests this year. Great teacher, and he also is one of those guys that dabbles in both anime and cartoons and video games, all these different things.
He's great.
You have started a lot of people's careers, and you have also done a little bit of everything. And you still do anime, you do cartoons, you've done major video games, all these different kind of things. As someone who has, not just speaking about myself, a lot of people that you have nurtured into the people that they are now, acting wise, what are some things that you found in terms of growing a performer, pushing them to the next level? People that have gone from like, you've got something, like you clearly are good at this, to the level that they're at, where like, wow, this is all I do for a handsome living now. Like
what do I find, or how do I develop
what do you yeah, I mean, a little bit of everything. Like I think of guys that started in the dubbing world. Okay, actually here's one I think of. You worked with Troy Baker many moons ago on like Kurokami and Gundam. Like, he started in dubbing. He went on to, he's Mr. Guy with Last of Us and all that stuff.
Mr. Guy.
But, like, Mr. Guy, sure. He's just an example out of my ass, because obviously he's a huge deal. But people that start in this and then that are able to ascend to like, doing, prelay shows and major video games and things. What are things that you notice in folks that makes them really strong, and especially as they improve over, like, even people you've worked with for a long time, that like seeing them grow over the course of 10, 15, 20 years at this point?
Yeah. Well, I will say, I think a lot of things I think in life go back to caring about it. One of the things, so a core value for NYV Post, and I tell this to everyone that like is an employee or directs with us or writes with us or anything. I don't say it to all the actors, but basically if you're on staff kind of, or like in production, on the production side, there is no job that comes through our doors that we are allowed to speak negatively about. I mean, when I'm in anywhere else, they'll be like, oh, this is the good job, like this is the big important one for a big name, and this is the crappy cheap one, that we just have to make money on or something, or not lose money on. I won't let anyone use negative language on anything. At worst, it is a sick puppy that needs to be nursed back to health, like Demon Fighter. So that said, it starts with caring. And then for years, the employee manual was the 4 agreements, the ancient Toltec wisdom. It's so silly. I sound like a corny hippie dad or something, but like I literally would be like, this is, just, be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't assume what all the, and then there's a 4th one, whatever. But, like I can't remember 4 agreements, but I basically think that's a thing. Now the other thing that we say, and I said it enough around the studio that one of my old engineers, Anthony Tortorisi, ended up making a screensaver out of it. I would always say choices are greater than voices. And for me, what really matters in the end, the magic that we weave isn't about just being able to do like a goofy voice. It's about being able to communicate something that resonates with an audience, right? So, choices greater, greater than sign voices was a screensaver for years at the studio. And I think the ability to do two things, to be specific, to be creative, to use your imagination, and sometimes not just do what you think someone else assumes. Now, Troy Baker, you mentioned, is impossibly versatile. But the thing about his versatility, it's not just that he can completely like transform his voice and it doesn't sound like the same instrument. Like, some people are like, I'm doing this voice, I'm doing this voice. And you can tell from the articulators, from the resonant cavity, like it's the same person. Like you'll hear Mel Blanc and go, oh my gosh, he did a million voices, but I know it's Mel. Sometimes. And sometimes you're like, oh crap, that was Mel. But with Troy, his like crazy super mutant ability is to really sound like different people. And when he does it, it's like everything shifts. I'm not sure what he does, what his process is, but you hear like things slow down internally. My freshman acting teacher, this Russian guy who defected and came to New York, was like, he would talk about tempo rhythm. And I didn't understand what he was talking about, but I think Troy is a great example of changing his internal like metabolism to sound like someone else, right? It's just about having a perspective. So strong perspectives are huge. Also, the thing that happens more and more, I think there's a lot of like really talented new people coming in to the space, but not all of them have acting training. And the thing that I think I would want to tell everyone, trained, not trained, new or old, is specificity matters, ideas matter, but oh, what was the thought? I just lost it. Blame it on the COVID. What was I just thinking? It is. Oh, here's the thing. As production has to move faster and more efficiently, and the reason the people you see get cast all the time is because they're not waiting to be directed. Now, they will go in hard with whatever their choice is, and that's important. That was the first thing I learned on Ninja Turtles. When I did it, I was like, whoa, I've done so much, dubbing where you see the target you have to hit, and then you can, reverse engineer your performance into that. But when you just look at words on a page and they say falling, I'm like, off a curb or off a building, like how far am I falling? And I don't know what it is. So I'm asking at first, because I crashed the audition and felt like an intruder. For the first season of Ninja Turtles, I thought I was going to get replaced. I was not one of the guys they always use. I'd never worked for that company before. I crashed the audition. Thank God Peter Laird hand-picked me to be the turtle. But
oh, hell yeah. Very nice.
But I felt like I was going to get replaced, and I felt like an imposter. But the thing that I learned quickly was, sometimes the great legendary Sue Blue, who was RC in the Transformers, and she was a My Little Pony, and she was a misfit in Gem and the Holograms. She did everything. Her first job was the original Turtles Her first directing job was the original Ninja Turtles. Sorry,
Yeah,
if I'm speaking too fast, I'm just trying to get it all in.
No, please, no, do it. You're good.
But sometimes we'd do one take, maybe two, and move on. And I was like, what? And I was sort of hedging my performance. Well, I kind of, aim it down the middle and like they'll direct me from there, and sometimes they don't direct you from there. So the most important thing is have ideas, have a firm perspective, and bring it every time, which is why I love working with theater performers. There's not a second chance. There's no like cut, paste, undo, replace. There's like you're in front of people doing the thing, and if you screw it up, then they paid a lot of money to see you screw it up.
And you roll with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, you talk about like the Tatashores and the Delisles and the Tara Strongs and and the other people you've mentioned today. Like they bring ideas. So a director can be like, sometimes the direction is as vague as like, it's funnied up, which is perhaps lazy. At the same time, the directors now have a lot of other things to manage. So if an actor can just make you look great, then they're going to get cast a lot. So think about, another perspective. And if you have time for like a quick story about an actor doing that and teaching me that.
Yes, please, absolutely.
So I worked on Venture Brothers, right? I'm a Venture Brother. We did a number of seasons at my studio, and because my studio is bi-coastal and the cast is bi-coastal, we, used both. So there was one day we were going to record Patrick Warburton at my place in LA, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get to see the legend, see his process, Putty, And the amazing thing is, like, he shows up and he's such a charmer. He's like, hey, how's everyone doing? And we're all like, wow, it's wonderful.
It's very good, by the way.
And I'm not half the man Patrick Warburton is, but he, there's a scene in season 2, I think it's Hate Floats, and he's like challenging the monarch, and in the script it sounded very adversarial, and I think the line was like, "I don't want to hear another one of your excuses, monarch," and he sort of like meanders through the line, and I was offended. I was like, he's doing it wrong. Did he read the script? Is he trying? What? I don't understand it. Like, is he supposed to be the tough guy? That doesn't sound tough. It sounds sleepy. And that led to a conversation with the creator. And then they worked out this thing, and it sort of evolved into a much better choice than my goody two shoes, like knee jerk response, which was Brock is so tough, the monarch doesn't pose a threat. And so instead of being like, I don't want to hear another one of your excuses, he literally yawns the line in one breath and goes, I don't want to hear another one of your excuses. And it ends up being such a more delicious choice because he didn't do the first assumption take. He delved deeper and found something way more rich. So then I was like, oh my gosh, maybe dubbing has taught me to be too much of a good boy and I should take it off the page more. And that was a huge thing. Also, during Ninja Turtles, I remember thinking, I had this epiphany where I'm doing my lines, I'm standing next to the cast, and I just start thinking, instead of the guys being next to me or just doing my lines, I don't know where it came from, but I thought of like Donnie in the corner, like in front of me to the left, Mikey on the second tier of the sewer up behind me to the right, and then Raph on a punching bag over like sort of, at a different place. And just the idea of where you place them in space filled in some magical blanks for my imagination, and it informed my performance. I didn't think, I'll say it like this. I just thought, oh, you're over here, you're over there. And by the way, you over here just naturally changed who I was talking to. So that kind of specificity, I think, matters. And Patrick Warburton's example of like, yeah, don't do the boring take, do something special, was a huge lesson.
And I assume since then you do that for all your, when you have time, I'm assuming, to audition between the running 50 productions, do you apply all that still to this day, all those same lessons?
I really try to. It's harder for me to do it to myself. I can really do it I can do it as a director. And I feel like my job is not to tell you how to do anything. It's to learn who you are, discover your love language, and try to ignite your imagination. And you can do that efficiently. You can just be like, don't say it to your girlfriend, say it to your mom. That's pretty quick. And it was specific in a way that would otherwise be hard to explain how to say a line, which is why I also don't believe in line readings. Sometimes you have an idea or they just don't get the sense and you've got to give them the music, I guess. But for the most part, I think, line readings aren't just verboten and a bad sign of an inexperienced director. Sometimes you use them and it's fine. But I think it's not the way to get someone to imagine something and to be creative. It's a way to get someone to parrot. So,
Yeah, I've only ever like the rare times I ever employ it is if it's like it has to be so, usually if it's a joke and it has to be so specific to get the humor to land, like if like a certain word has to be hit or whatever, and even then it's just like a part of it or something. But God, there are so many things. I swear to God, we really could go on for like 3 to 5 to 6,000 hours about this shit. But no, I super appreciate you making the time again. I hope folks that have listened to this have learned something. You know what? Actually, here, one last thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I know you've talked about Venture Brothers at a million Comic-Cons and things. The 2003 Turtles, because there have been so many fantastic incarnations of that. But again, because the New York scene, I only got to know a small handful of those folks. They're really funny, great people. I don't know, any funny memories. You were talking about that great sense of choice in the sewer and kind of placing everybody, etc. Greg and Wayne and Sam, which is funny, Sam has gone on to be Raph in something else later on in a short, which was hilarious.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Total happenstance. Yeah. I don't know, any funny memories about, because you guys did what, like 5-6 seasons of Turtles, the 4Kids version?
Oh my gosh, I used to know, and now that you've said that, I don't remember.
It was a lot.
It was like 2003 to 9.
Yeah, so I mean, last little thing to go. Any kind of funny memories of that, just because that's a timeless kind of thing.
There's a whole lot of stories from the booth, and for a long time there was like a lot of trying to get each other to cut up. All those guys knew each other, like you said. They'd worked on Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. Like,
yeah.
And I was the noob. So my first day there, they're cutting up and being silly, and I was like, guys, what are you doing? We're gonna get fired. But I didn't want to be the uncool kid, so I was just like trying to keep to myself and do the thing, and I thought I was gonna get fired.
You were literally
anyway.
a Leonardo in that situation.
I was
You're like,
such a Leo. Yeah. Okay, from that time, and because it's about that, this is not. I'll try to answer that question in a second, but it just reminded me of a story.
No, please. Go ahead. Go ahead.
When I got cast, right, Sean Schimmel had just started working with us in New York, right? And by us, I mean me. We weren't an us until he came on to be like the first other guy. And he was like, dude, this is meant to be. He's like, look, dude, of course you got Leonardo. I was like, what? What do you mean? I think that was the worst. I don't think I was the best at it. I should have been Donnie. And he was like, no, dude, you're a Leo. You're born in August. So you got Leo. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not how they. Dude, I'm born near the monkey, and I play Goku. I was like, that's not. I don't think part of Peter the process. And then he goes, no. But that's the way you lead. So he's like, you always try to protect us from all the BS and the nonsense from like producers and clients making ridiculous asks. And then you work weekends so that we don't have to. And you work late nights so we don't have to. And you protect us, not because you want to work late nights, but because you want to protect your team. And Leonardo isn't the leader because he's got an attitude or wants to like flex. That's Raphael. Leonardo steps up because he is responsible to his family and wants to take care of them. And that's how you are a boss at NYV Post. So of course you got cast. And I was like, wait, what? And I feel like that was like the Peter Cullen advice he got from his brother about, don't just, what it means to be a leader. Don't just be a truck man, be a
leader.
Yeah.
But by the way, could I also point out, because I love the irony of that too, because then later Sean went on to be a version of Raph in the Turtles Forever thing. By total happenstance. I was like, well, how do you? Because he's such a Raph. He really is.
Totally red bandana.
Oh my God.
But then, there's 1,000 stories. Oh my gosh. Like, there was one. I'll forever be grateful to Veronica Taylor. We're doing, there's an episode we're doing for Turtles where they're like, okay, so you're always the Turtles, but then you'd sometimes pick up some other characters, right? And they were like, you're going to be Parker in this episode. And then we had holiday break and we were gone for like 3 or 4 weeks. Then the day we come back, they're like, oh, by the way, Parker's Australian. And I was like, you could have told me that a month ago. Are you kidding me? I've never done this accent. And I'm next to Veronica in the booth. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. You've been there, right? She's like, yeah, sure. It's fine. I'm like, how do you say cryogenic containment unit? And so she was like giving me advice in the booth and basically just trying to get my confidence up, because like half of the job with accents is confidence. And she was
sure.
No, you're doing great. I was like, I'm not doing great. I can't do this. And I was very upset about that. I was very shy about it. We always try to drop the word robot because Sue Blue was sometimes when she talked about it, she's like, oh yeah, and then the robots do this. And I thought it was the cutest thing I ever heard. So sometimes in the Walla, we would drop, oh no, here come the robots. And then she would be like, wait, what did you say? And we're like, robot. And she would always catch it and not let us sneak it in.
Oh my gosh.
God bless her. And what else? We came up with My Ninja. It was a thing we were talking about. At one point I was trying to do a line and they just kept like cutting up and like making me laugh. And I was, at this point, Sue Blue's in LA and we're in New York and she's on a phone patch and she can't see what's going on. There's no Zoom. And all she knows is she called action and I'm not doing it. And she's like, what's going on in there? And I was like, I'm sorry. And I just turned to the other guys and I was like, Ninja, please. And then that caught on. It was really weird. But so we, to this day, we like text each other, what's up, my Ninja? And I just got a call from Michelangelo who's like asking, hey, you want to do some conventions together? And I was like, wait, what? Really? Maybe so. That would be fun. I haven't seen those guys in forever. It was a really good family. We had all these parties and stuff. We did one party at 4 Kids. This made me insane. On the way there, I decided I'm going to make a costume on the way to the thing. I stopped in at a hardware store, got a piece of rail, a shower curtain, and some like bendy stuff. And I made a shower around me. And I was, basically Daniel LaRusso in the first Karate Kid, where he shows up to the dance as a shower so he can hide from the Cobra Kai guys, right? And and then we get there, and I end up winning a costume contest. And when I do, one of the executives of an entertainment company goes, hey, I love this guy. He's taking a bath in this economy. And I was like, what? So I won like a McDonald's gift card and I gave it to a homeless person. Yeah.
Oh, that's the most New York thing I've ever heard in my life. Is that last bit you just wow? I think that's a perfect note.
Oh, well, let's say
you
got to end on
please,
pizza
please.
because at some point they started. Wednesday was our record day, and they started doing pizza days, and they would buy like a pile of pizzas for the whole office. And then we're in the booth, like for the last 30 minutes of the record, would just be smelling pepperoni come through the vents. And me and Mikey especially were like, oh, God bless America. Oh, I got to eat that stuff right now. What, you take what? And we were very distracted, and then we just run out there.
Yeah, Wayne is extremely Italian like myself, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so life imitated art. The Ninja Turtles were eating pizza every session for like years.
Oh my God. Oh, hell yeah. What I would not have given to see that stuff. Okay, I know we both got to run. We got things happening. Michael, thank you. Seriously, you're great. Everybody, you're M Center on Twitter. Yeah,
I am M Center on Twitter, and like an old person, I use that more than Instagram. I promise I'll try to get up to date with that. Maybe I need to TikTok or something. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, we've got cool stuff in the works. We've been working on together. If you guys haven't checked out On Aim, Warrior at the Borderline, or Kingdom, they're on Crunchyroll. The couple shows that I had the pleasure of working on with MY Post and all the great folks over there that are wonderful. Thank you for all of the stuff you've done for me. I'll say that here for all the people that don't know that, because you've been wonderful to me.
My pleasure. And thank you for taking the work seriously and putting your heart in it.
Oh, and once again, to everybody, to those of you who listen to these interviews this year, to all the lovely folks we had, well, once again, thank you to Mick and Mark and Brian and David and Michael for joining me. I really hope that you all got something out of this, whether it entertained you or helped teach you a thing or two about our business, or if you're another working actor, whether I've met you or not, if this might have helped inspire you a little bit. I've certainly learned more than a handful of things. I've got more work to do. I've got the class tonight with Mick, which I'm excited about. But thank you very much. I've got more cool stuff happening on the channel. Subscribe, do all that stuff, whatever. Happy Halloween to everybody. Michael, what's your Halloween candy of choice, real quick, before we go?
What, candy choice?
Yes.
Apples with razor blades in them. I mean, it's extra Halloween. That's how I grew up with. We in my neighborhood, we got razor blades in our apples. It was New York. It was another time. It was rough.
I love you, but I hate you, though. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you next one. Be safe out there, I guess. Don't have any razor blades in your apples.
Check your fruit.
And until next year, with whatever people I'm able to sucker into doing these interviews, please keep talking pretty, keep saying beautiful things, and we'll see you next time. Fare thee well.